Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Ian with Rail City. Don't forget to subscribe if you find this video helpful, and check out my band's indie rock music on my profile. This is a guitar review and demo, so I'm going to talk about this guitar first, then play it. If you just want to hear the playing, just skip like halfway through the video. That's totally fine. But today we're going to be taking a look at a Veester Concert Series 2. They have two different versions of the crackle print of this guitar. One has colors underneath, one is just sparkle. This is just the sparkle. Depending on your taste, you may think this is gaudy as hell, or you may think it's cool as hell. I personally think it's awesome. And yeah, as you can probably tell from this guitar, these were Jackson and Charvel like knockoffs made in Korea during the mid to late 80s, and I think they were made all the way up until the late 90s. So, as anybody who frequently watches my channel knows, I'm a big fan of old Jackson and Charvel guitars because of A, how funky they looked. A lot of the newer designs are more aggressive and more specifically designed for the metal crowd, which is fine, but before Fender owned Jackson, Jackson wasn't just a metal guitar. They were in competition with Fender, and they made, Stratocaster and Telecaster light guitars to try and entice the Fender and Gibson audience. But they made them a lot funkier and with their own like Jackson spin on things, like the hockey stick headstock, like the bright colors and stuff like that. So I'm a big fan of old Jackson guitars because they look cool, and then because they're made really, really well. Specifically the Japanese ones. The fretboards are always absolutely flawless, much more so than any Fender guitar I've ever come across from any era. So I think the question is here, how does this Jackson knockoff fare compared to the real deal? And my answer to that is it's about as good as a Charvel. If I've seen this exact guitar on eBay for I think it was almost $700. If you're going to pay $700 for this, even though it is a neck through guitar, which is awesome. I mean, look at this shit. That's a total ripoff. Don't pay it. The fretboard here is okay. If you've played Charvel stuff, this reminds me of you know, the lower echelon of Jackson guitars, where it's nice, but just a little bit imperfect all around. The biggest gripe I have about this guitar is the truss rod can't be adjusted far enough to get it where it needs to be. There's some dead frets down here at the bottom, and then it's a little bit too high up here near the 12th fret. That's a function of the truss rod not being able to go tight enough. Yeah, this just isn't really a sleek, mean machine to play all around, even though it definitely looks like it. A real sheep in wolf's clothing, so to speak. But a couple other things just to point out that this guitar specifically has wrong with it that you might want to look out for if you're looking at buying something like this. We can see here this has the knockoff Floyd Rose bridge. These are a little bit nicer than the Jackson knockoff ones, but not a lot. Basically the same thing. But the screw that you use here to adjust intonation, the thread is stripped on one of the screws. I know you can't see it, but definitely check that if you're looking at buying one of these. Yeah, one of these threads is totally stripped, so it doesn't intonate properly. I think it's the G string here. I also just always like saying G string in these reviews. And then let's see. These are missing, so I don't know how well that locks. I haven't bothered to replace it. There's one other bad thing I was going to point out. What was it? Oh, shoot. Oh, yeah. This is a big thing, and you'll probably see it later. The bridge pickup, even though this is probably the best sounding bridge pickup I have ever played, really chunky and warm all around. A lot of presence and grit, like you'd be looking for if you were playing metal, but that's like what EMG pickups try to do, and they always sound too cold and kind of just a little bit bland for me. But this guy definitely has flavor to it. Probably my favorite bridge pickup I've ever played, but something's wrong with the electronics. The At least if you turn it on initially, like the first minute or two it's on, the volume will fade in and out. You'll probably see that later on in the demo. All right, I'm gonna take a minute to refrain from ratting on this guitar to talk about the pickups here. These pickups are really really good. If you're ever on eBay and you see these ripped out laying around cheap, which is highly likely, I'd pick some up. We've got kind of a Telecaster like setup here. As I mentioned, bridge pickup is great. Two pickups together give you a nice kind of blank canvas guitar sound that just sounds really really good. Not too hot, not too thin, like just one single coil engaged. Just a nice kind of standard guitar sound that you can work with for whatever sound you're going for. And then the neck pickup here allows you to, it's almost like these two are like yin and yang. This is your dark, heavy pickup, and if you want to clean up and do more of like a pop sound or I don't know, folk or country or something, totally achievable with the neck pickup, as we'll see later. Big fan of the electronics of this guitar, other than the weird issue that I can't figure out with the bridge pickup. So your neck profile here isn't super thin. This is about your standard Fender fare, so not a wizard style neck or anything like that. I guess it's a little bit flatter on the back than than a Stratocaster, but not by much. Pretty big neck here, and then something to watch out for with this guitar. I mean, it generally looks cool as hell, and I did want to mention. I think these come stock with. Is it Grover? No, Goto tuners. The stock tuners here are really, really nice. They're heavy and they really, when you're turning them, they feel solid. They feel reliable. So big fan of these. Hence why I've never replaced the bolts on the nut here, on the locking nut. But I was going to mention the fret inlays here. If I'm not mistaken, on all Jackson guitars, you have the mother of pearl thing going on. Or I don't know too much about guitar materials, but it's always shiny and it always looks cool. Like that's their signature thing. I don't know. Maybe they didn't make the fret inlays on here shiny because the rest of the guitar is already pretty much aglow with fucking awesomeness. But these are just like white linoleum things, and they stain really easy. And they're kind of ugly all around. But anyway, if you see this on an ad online, you're probably not going to notice that. You're going to think these are like your standard Jackson fare. They're not. There's some cheap white inlay stuff that isn't very aesthetically pleasing. Just a couple random factoids I want to throw in there. If I'm not mistaken, it doesn't say it anywhere on the guitar, but Veester was made in Korea by... Veester was owned by another company that didn't have anything to do with guitars. They were just trying to ride the wave of hair metal guitar popularity. And this is probably the most poorly crafted Korean guitar I've ever played. Just really inconsistent craftsmanship all around on the neck, and you can't get the action but so low. And the other thing I want to mention was the price point of these guitars. You can find generally 3 or 4 Veesters floating around eBay. They tend to be the bolt-on neck ones that go for anywhere from $200 to $300. I'm sure that's about what they're worth, and that's about what this one's worth too. I've only seen this on sale online once, and it was about $700. It wasn't selling, but I saw whoever was selling it, they sponsored it, so it was popping up everywhere. And I guess they managed to flip it, but once again, this is a ripoff for $700. I saw this guy on Offerup and got it from a lady who had way too much money that she didn't know what to do with it. She didn't even really care about me paying her for this guitar. I paid like $250 for this guitar, which is awesome for what it is, because the closest equivalent I've seen of this guitar was a $5,000 Jackson Custom Shop guitar, which is, awesome getting something with that same look for $200. But definitely not exactly the meanest machine of a guitar that you'll ever play. But despite all that, this is one of my favorite guitars to play. It's fun. The neck here is just... I mean, how can you say no to that? That's so wild, you know what I mean? But... I don't know. I consider myself more of a songwriter than a guitarist, and this is when I sit down with this thing, it just gets me pumped up. You know what I mean? And I think at the end of the day, that's what's the most important thing in a guitar. And different things pump different people up. Like some people will say this is really gaudy, and a good old classic Telecaster, like a million other people have played, will get them all pumped up because they feel like some artist that they admire or something like that. But I like fun guitars. I like to write fun songs. And yeah, you don't get much more party pumped into a guitar than this. Now let's listen to how this Veester concert series 2 sounds. We're going to be playing through a Mesa Express 550 with ruby tubes in it, and I'm micing it up with the Sennheiser E609 dynamic microphone, and the preamp is a Tascam US 1608. So there's your signal chain. Let's have some fun. you have it, folks. That's how a Veester Concert Series 2 sounds. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments or any thoughts on the guitar. And be sure to check out my channel. All I post about is music, stuff my band records, and different gear and stuff like that. So if you enjoyed this video, there's a lot more of that coming. And I hope you have a stupendous day.